Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. I know it's been a while, but we're coming back. We got a big episode here. I guess not big important, big a lot of stuff happening. So in this episode, we're going to talk about stacking your effects to get different sounds. And to do that, I've made my own groups of all these audio effects that you have available in Live. And we're going to talk about how those groups, how you want to order them to get kind of the best results just jumping in. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the main rule when we're doing this, and that is just experiment. Because everything I'm going to talk about here, it's geared towards getting a good sound or getting something that will work right away. But it's not like a rule that you have to follow of this must follow that. You can make up some really cool sounds once you know what you're doing just by tweaking things around, and you can really refine it by changing up the order into something that you want. There's no rule against it. What we're talking about today is just kind of the basic intro, as the series is geared towards, of stacking your effects on your channel so that you get something good right away and you don't get discouraged by having something that sounds really bad. So we're going to be doing some cutting around and loading in different things so you can see it. And don't worry, we'll have some cheater sheets at the very end that you can screenshot to save so you don't have to video up the entire time while you're working. We'll have those at the end, so let's get to it. Alright, so here we are. We have our first group of effects, and I'm just going to load them into the audio effects on this track so you can see which ones I'm talking about. But this first group, I'm calling the additive effects. And what that means is it's going to be an effect that's going to add other sounds, other pitches to your dry sound coming into the computer. So it's not going to change your sound necessarily, it's just going to add something else to it. And the three effects in this category are corpus, resonators, and vinyl distortion. And the corpus and the resonators, you can adjust them to add extra pitches as you play. The vinyl distortion I included in this category because, as you may have found out, or you will find out if you use it, that crackle volume will really take over. Every time I use this, use it very, very sparingly, a little dabble duty. But I included it here because it really does add some of those extra artifacts you'd get from an old vinyl record. So we're going to put these first in the chain, typically because you want to have the pitches you're adding with these effects also affected by everything afterwards. Alright, now we have the next group. This is the tone group. And these are basically all your various flavors and styles of distortion or overdrive, or basically just dirtying up the sound in some way. And you want to have these towards the beginning of your effects chain because they have a tendency to muddy everything up. So if you, we'll say you set up a really nice chain that has a really delicate sound, and then you throw a big old, we'll say, overdrive or erosion on there, then it's going to really muddy that up and make it not sound so hot. So you typically want to have these towards the beginning. And this group includes amp, auto filter, but we're going to put a little asterisk on that, cabinet, dynamic tube, erosion, frequency shifter, overdrive, pedal, redux, saturator, and another asterisk one, the vocoder. So in experimenting, a lot of these kind of do varying shades of the same thing. In its basic form, the auto filter is just using it as a stagnant filter is going to change your sound, and you probably don't want to filter out some of the things you might have for effects later on, which is why we threw it in this group. And our other asterisk at the end here, vocoder, this is another filter. It's a much more complex filter, and so we threw it in here for a similar reason. And we'll go into a little more depth later in a future video with the vocoder. Here we have the modulation group, and this is a smaller group since I wanted to throw in the things that were only dealing with modulation. And in this one we have chorus, flanger, and your phaser. With these you can adjust the dry wet so you can adjust what you're going to, how much of the effect you're going to hear. But these will actually modulate your sound as it comes in. It's not adding anything to it, which makes these a little bit different than the additive effects. And these, you usually get a little bit more delicate harmonic changes than with the tone effects, which is why I usually put these after your tone effects, since these can be a little bit more delicate than, say, a distortion. And putting this before a distortion, usually you're going to, as I said before, muddy up the more delicate nature of these effects. This group is the space and time group. And these effects are going to be your delays or your reverbs, where you're changing the space that the sound sounds like it's in, or you're adding repeats of the sound after you play it. And this group includes auto pan, beat repeat, delay, echo, filter delay, grain delay, looper, and reverb. These effects you're going to want to put towards the end, because whether it's a space or time, you're going to be adding more to the signal. And so if we, for instance, have a reverb where we have a long delay, if you run that through, say, a really heavy distortion, that can really send it over the top and make it really disgusting and nasty and blow your ears out if you have your headphones on. So that's why you want to usually put them towards the end. Now, there are a couple examples where you can get really cool sounds by putting these, say, before a distortion, but you have to know how to adjust it so that it doesn't get over the top and, like I said, blow your ears out. Alright, now on to the last group, and these are your studio effects. And these, you're probably going to end up putting them at the end or on the master track to put everything together and polish it up. But once you get to know how to work some of these, you can put them more or less anywhere to clean up the sound or polish it up. And in previous videos when I've said some of the effects you may not be able to tell the difference right away, these are the ones that if you're just fooling around and you don't know what you're doing, you probably won't notice much of a difference, or they're more utility effects that may not change the sound at all, such as the tuner. Anyway, this group includes channel EQ, compressor, drum bus, EQ8, EQ3, external audio effect, gate, glue compressor, limiter, multiband dynamics, spectrum, tuner, and utility. And these, if you're just trying to find strange sounds, Probably going to avoid these, as I said, but some of them, notably your EQs, you may get into to help sculpt your sound a little bit, at least until you get into using some of these to polish up your final product. Okay, so there's one effect that we didn't include, and that is what I have highlighted here, your audio effect rack. And this isn't so much an effect as it is a container for other effects. So to see what I'm talking about, let's open up and we'll pick a preset. It doesn't matter which one. This one sounds wonderful. So you can see it pops in and it has 8 knobs. Each one's got a different characteristic that it changes. But let's open this up a little bit, and we'll first hit the middle button on the left. You can see we have 2 paths for the audio to go through in this effect. Let's open it up one step further, the bottom button on the left. Now let's open it one step further and hit the bottom button on the left. And we're highlighting dry, so we don't see anything, but let's click on chain. Oh, too much. Now it pops open, and if we scroll over, you can see more effects stacked underneath this. So again, we have another, this one actually has a second audio effect rack in it. Let's use a second one just as another example. And how about we'll pick an amp simulation. All right, so we'll hit the middle button, see a chain, that left button, and you can see all these effects pop in. If we open them up by clicking on them, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 effects contained in this audio effect rack. And we'll get into this in the future, putting these audio effect racks onto a track and building an effect. It's a lot like stacking them just piece by piece on the track, but you can also make some of these controls interact with each other and simplify changing certain parameters around. Alright, so now we're going to talk about a feature in Live that'll make experimenting and playing around with some of these effects a little bit easier. So normally, if we select an effect, we'll say chorus. You can double click it or drag it down into your track. Then if you want to change it, you gotta delete it and put in, say we didn't want that chorus, we want a flanger instead. You have to delete it and put the flanger in. There's another way of doing this where you don't have to do that though. So we're experimenting, we'll put our chorus back in. If we're not sure this is what we want here, we can hit this button in the top right of the effect title. And you can see up in the browser, we have this red bar pop up that says swapping audio effect. So now we will search through. We don't want just a standard chorus. Let's try this slow pan. And we can hit return or click on it, and it swaps it out in the same place. So maybe we keep going, slow pan isn't doing it for us, let's switch to warning. Now warning loads in. And to get out of this, so we want to add another effect after this chorus. Warning is doing it, want to add something, just hit the X in the same place that we toggled that on. So with one effect, maybe this isn't all that useful. It saves a couple keystrokes, but let's see where it would be really useful, where we're going to load in, we'll just click on a few effects. We've got 5 or 6 in here now. And we're playing, and Turns out we don't like this corpus, so we'll hot swap this, and maybe we really wanted an auto pan there. That way, we didn't have to delete it and then drag it in and have to jockey everything around. It saves a little bit of time, makes it a little bit easier, especially if you're just experimenting. Okay, so now I'll give you a little example of one of the exceptions that I was talking about. And this is one that seems to be pretty popular, especially with pedal makers right now, of putting reverb and distortion together, and usually putting the reverb before the distortion. So let's load in a reverb, and which one do we want to do? I think we'll just do pedal. And I'm gonna get this set up and we'll give you an example. Alright, so then there you have a, maybe not the best example, but what we could do to show you how bending the rules can still make a cool effect. So again, don't forget, all of this is just to give kind of a basic introduction and get you started with things that will be pleasing and don't need a ton of fine tuning to make it work. Don't be afraid, if once you get comfortable with this, to go out on a limb and experiment and try flipping things around and seeing what you can come up with. That being said, if you have any questions, leave a comment below, or you think I missed something, leave a comment below and I'll try to hit it in a future video. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll have those cheater cards coming up in just a second.